Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar Demonstrating Impact Through Teen Summer Reading. Today's webinar will be presented by Kelly Zarnicki and Catherine Hayden. I'm Nicole Gibby Mungia, and I'm YALSA's Program Officer for Continuing Education. And before we get started, I'd just like to go over a few features of our webinar software. We'll be communicating with each other today via the chat box, so if you have any questions, please feel free to text them into the chat box, which is located on the lower left-hand side of your screen. If you would prefer to not see the chat box during the course of the webinar, you can click on the full screen button, which is located on the upper right-hand side of your screen, and that will eliminate the chat and attendee list boxes. And then to undo the full screen option, just click on the button again. At the upper left hand side of your screen, you should see an image of a person with his hand raised. If you click on the down arrow next to the image of that person, you'll see that you have a variety of options, including raising your hand if you have a question, laughing, applauding, agreeing or disagreeing. And if at any point during the webinar you experience any audio issues, just type them into the chat box to let me know, and I'll work with you to resolve them. Following the presentation, I will email links for the recorded presentation and the slides to everyone, so you will not miss a thing. And again, we're very happy that you could join us today. So let's begin today's program. Kelly and Catherine?
Hi, everyone. This is Kelly.
And this is Catherine. We're glad you guys are here joining us.
And I'll just give you a little bit of background of myself. Again, this is Kelly. I'm a teen services librarian in Charlotte, North Carolina. I have worked with teens for about over 7 years here at this library system. And I've got experience with outcome-based evaluation programs, which we're going to talk about during this presentation. And I will hopefully be able to share some insights with you.
And my name is Catherine Hayden. I'm currently a Children's Service Manager with Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library. I used to work with Kelly in Teen Services. I am also fortunate to be leading our library's 2013 Summer Reading Initiative for all ages. So I'm happy that I'm able to provide feedback and information on how best to gather data and information for your teen summer reading programs. So thanks again for joining us.
So here are our learning objectives. So this is what we anticipate covering today. So the best practices for collecting data for from the teen summer reading participants, how to share the data that you collected. So what are the different avenues that you can use to share it, and who are you going to share it with? And then using this information that you collect to help share your library's story. So hopefully this seed money is really going to help grow your teen services program even further. And as we move through the discussion, we'll hopefully find out, where everyone is at in terms of your teen services program, as a big picture. So first of all, after we say welcome, we want to say congratulations to all of you that have received this Dollar General grant. That is awesome. You guys are all rock stars. And we just want to ask, how are you using the grant to enhance your teen summer reading program? So, anything from resources, speakers, supplies, just marketing. Feel free to shout it out there in the chat box just so we can get some idea.
So interns, and hopefully those interns are helping with programs, or I imagine they are, programming, managing volunteers.
Cool.
Perfect. And Patricia, do your volunteers kind of present a lot of the programs or handle traffic, sign up registration, programming and incentives from Julie? So you guys were able to enhance programming by, more and more exciting or relevant incentives. Laura, a book club for teen with free books, which is always awesome. We want to get them home with books. More interns to help with programming and signups. Adding books that support the summer reading list at schools. Oh, Stacy, that's really cool. Badges, and that's how teens are marking their summer reading. STEM programming.
Wow, 90 volunteers, that's a lot.
More interns. Gift cards are always good for teens. Incentives and a Skype visit with an author, very cool. Lots of interns, great.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So lots of teen participation, leadership development, community outreach support.
Job experience.
And hopefully through having teens very active and alive in your programs, they're serving as really positive role models for teens in your community that may come in. Just a little side there. So lots of interns, awesome. So it looks like the Dollar General grant is really working to make teen summer reading at your location, and in some ways, summer reading for all ages, because I know that the teen interns will be working with kids, bigger and better and more of a comprehensive and positive experience for staff and participants. Perfect.
That's great, Patricia, about the intern. That's wonderful. And of course you all probably know this too, but the interns and volunteers, you know, the more invested they're in the program, it's probably going to grow naturally as well. So that's great.
Continue typing, but we may move on to the next slide. But we definitely want to hear what you guys are using your Dollar General funding for.
Okay, let me turn down my volume. This is Kelly. I'm probably the super loud one.
And I just turned mine up. So.
Okay, thank you. Is that better?
Can you guys hear me now better, Catherine?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Yay. Sorry, I won't shout at anyone anymore. Okay. So this next slide is about telling our story and teen services. And a lot of you are probably familiar in 2010, and a lot of you probably even experienced this in your own library system if you were in a library back then. But at the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library, we had severe budget cuts. Over about 180 people were laid off. Library buildings closed, and we had hour reductions that we're still, you know, facing today. We have days out of the week that certain branches are closed. And as a result of that, there was a task force that was put together, a community task force, and they came up with a report that had a lot of suggestions for positioning the library in a better place, you know, so that we could grow out of this rubble, so to speak, you know, and build ourselves up again. And one of their main focuses in the report was on our area of programming, because programming is just such a huge part of what we do as a library, probably what a lot of you do as well. And looking at, you know, how can we tell our story about programming? How can we focus our programming in a way that we're not doing the same thing as, you know, everyone else in the community? So how can we really make it a powerful service and show that we're making a difference with the programs that we do have? You know, how can we do that? And one of the ways we started looking at our programs differently was to, you know, focus it into three main areas, including literacy,
Educational support.
Educational support and
Workforce development.
workforce development. Thank you. I hear this all the time, and then it just slips my mind. So, we chose those areas for all of our programs, children, adult, teen, to focus on. And we also chose several programs with the help of an outside agency to develop outcome-based measures for these programs. So in other words, taking a program and saying, what are our goals for the program? What can we say how are we impacting the community? How are we making a difference? And we developed, goals for those programs, intermediate goals, long-term goals, and then tools, such as surveys are mostly the commonly used tool. And we just really found it effective, when it came to writing our annual report and just throughout the year of how we can better tell our story and show that we really are, in fact, making a difference. So that's just kind of our background in a nutshell that we hope to be able to translate in this presentation for your summer reading program. And it really is a fulfilling way to give programs, because when it's put in the language of, these are the differences that we're making, it just becomes a really satisfying way to interact with people. So for those of you, that might be already, measuring your outcomes and things like that, I'm sure you might have a similar experience as well. So we just wanted to kind of share that, give a little context for the presentation.
And summer reading is the largest program that our library system does annually. In talking about summer reading programs, we learned in preparing this presentation, and I learned in coordinating this year's program, that there isn't really any data out there on the impact of summer reading, or, there's not hard evidence that shows where if you read over the summer, you're smarter when you return to school. We know that to be a fact. We know that kids and teens who read 20 minutes a day, have exposure to books, visit their library, are better prepared to succeed in school. But many of our stakeholders really require data behind that. And so part of our focus in summer reading is collecting data to show how a program like summer reading really does impact families, teens, kids, and help them prepare themselves better educationally, and then set them up for success once they enter the workforce. So as you're collecting data, there's certain points along the way where you have a prime opportunity, have teens at your disposal, an audience where you can gather feedback from them. So at sign up, usually to register for summer reading, teens are able to, and happy to give you their name, what school they go to, age or rising grade, and that helps you define your teen audience, figuring out who's in your library, what school are they coming from, and then also what school aren't they coming from, what areas of your community do you need to do a better job of reaching or get a message out to a little bit stronger. So determining when you want to gather information. Sign up is a great one, as well as surveys, potentially after programs within the library or associated with a milestone where they get an incentive. So halfway through, at the end, having a survey to gather information. So once you know when you want to gather information from teens, determine kind of what you really need to know. And that I define as information that you're expected to report back to stakeholders. And stakeholders can be anyone. Stakeholders are library staff, the teens themselves, the parents of teens, community members, county or city boards, the library board, library administration. Those are all stakeholders who are invested in your program and want to know the impact that your program and the library is making in the community. So determine what you need to know. And need to know should be what these stakeholders expect. So they expect to know the numbers, definitely, how many teens you're reaching, potentially the number of staff involved and how that kind of works out, to know how many staff hours it takes to make something happen, how much money you spent on prizes. Dollar General very likely wants to know how you're grant that you received specifically led to an increase or more positive experiences. Those are all things that you definitely need to report back. And then because you have this group of teens that you have access to, you can gather a lot of other things. You can gather things that you really want to know so that you can serve teens better. And these are things like, what kind of programs do you want to see at the library? And not just that, but when can you come to a program? Is it best to do it immediately after school or 7 o'clock or on a Saturday afternoon? When do you want to connect with the library? This year, our Teen Summer Reading Survey focuses on communication preferences, so figuring out what's the best way to reach teens. We know it's not email, because teens don't email. That's how they talk to adults. But we want to see, are they on Tumblr? Are they on Twitter? So using this group of teens to see how they can kind of connect with the library, where we can meet them in the social network where they're already at. I think you can also, with this group of teens, talk about library advocacy or community advocacy. We had teens that were speaking at our most recent Board of County Commissioners meeting to advocate for the library. So this is a way to build a relationship, showing teens that the library is important to them, kind of pulling that together and making sure they realize what an impact this has made and how they can give back. So just using this targeted group of teens to start building the library, the teen services program at your library. You do also want to make sure, as you're thinking about gathering information, that your goals may be related to strengthening your programming or after-school opportunities are in line with your county and city priorities. And most cities or counties have goals related to education and quality of life. So tying new initiatives that you want to do, an after-school book club or an SAT prep group, all of those things can definitely be tied to city or county priorities. And that will help build your story about how teen services, teen programming at your library is impacting your entire area.
Okay, so our next slide is another audience participation question. And we just wanted to get a feel for what teen services at your library is like. So, in other words, do you have a pretty fully developed program? Is it brand new? Is the grant starting it off? What does it look like?
And then with that, how is this grant and this opportunity to have the best summer reading program for teens ever, how is that going to take the teen services program that you have to the next level? So lots of teens who volunteer, but not many who attend programs, from Heather. A second to that, yeah, we have that a lot
Yes.
at a lot of our locations here in Charlotte. So growing teen participation, great.
Mm-hmm.
So I heard giving away an iPad, which is always good. So having extra interns. So you can already tell that having more people on the front line is helping you manage summer reading better.
And that's great, the teens developing the programs.
Oh, so teens had to volunteer in order to get an iPad. So tweens. Great. Teen involvement through a teen advisory board that's led to more successful programs. Perfect. I love when people are able to use teens to promote their events. Like Ron, like Dan said. And yes, if you give them food, they will come. And they will even eat granola bars. I used to give away apples that were left over for my lunch sometimes. So the prizes, incentives are definitely a great way to get teens involved. And if you can hook them with that, most of the time they stay. Yeah. And Ron, it's definitely hard to restart as one group cycles out and graduates or moves on. Finding the new ones can be hard. Although summer is probably an optimal time because they're looking for leadership opportunities and have the time. So it sounds like all of you guys are coming from a fairly established place with your teen programming, and I think what's most important is that you're working to continuously make sure that you're responsive to what they need and want, and that you're continually improving. You're looking for new ways to serve the teens that you have. And so it's clear why you got the Dollar General grant. Awesome. Yeah, it's definitely hard to work with older teens. They just have so many more time commitments. I think that's something we face very regularly.
And also sometimes for larger library systems, just trying to find the niche of what one branch might be able to appeal to certain teens, versus another branch that could be in a completely different neighborhood. It could just be totally different. So that can be a good challenge.
And workforce development skills, I think that's why having teen volunteers and allowing for teen participation, even if it's through a teen advisory board, is great. Those are the skills that help them prepare for the workforce and for college. And then waiting to see what Dan is typing, and then we'll kind of move on. So like I said before, it looks like you guys are using this summer as a prime opportunity to continue to engage teens and as well as to build on that, which is great. And I think one of the best things that you can do when you do have this group in the summer is use them for the things that you mentioned: volunteers, teen advisory boards, really kind of getting on their pulse and seeing exactly what they want from you. And I think in some ways we've used teen summer reading for that. So not only asking about their favorite library programs, but asking, did you know we had library programs? Putting up flyers, bookmarks in unusual places. We work with a skate shop here and send programming flyers there. We flyer the holds of teens who put books on hold. Will stick a bookmark or a flyer in there because we know we have teen readers that come in every day to pick up their books, but they may not stay for a program. So try to do some of that cross-marketing. But then as far as collecting data from the teens, in 2010, we had a successful summer reading program with over 1,000 teens completing summer reading, which was 30 hours of reading. And part of our questions in that final survey, each teen had to complete a survey, 3 seconds or less probably, before they were entered into a grand prize drawing. And the grand prize was for an iPad or a laptop, I believe, or one of each. But I think one thing we wanted to know that year was, what do you like to read? And so I included a screenshot from that survey there, and by asking them about their genre preferences, we were actually able to see when we're doing weeding or when we're placing books on hold and see that many of our copies are set to lost. That tells us what genres we need to order more of, what books we want to make sure we always have stocked on the shelf. So I know that when manga and graphic novels and all of that, when those get lost, which they do, I'm definitely going to replace those. But I also can see from this survey that fan fiction was pretty popular. I think about 17 or 18% said that they do like reading fan fiction. So maybe then I could host a workshop about writing fan fiction or evaluating fan fiction for a popular book series like The Hunger Games or something, kind of tying in something that I saw that teens wanted, that said that they were interested in building a program around that, or building an extra service around that, or in the very least making sure that we do have the books that they want to read on the shelf in good quantity. So I think just using the teens that you have in your libraries in the summer when they have that free time to really build your program. And a lot of you guys said that you had older teens, using those teens as leaders, asking them, you know, you're in 10th grade, what would you have wanted as a 6th grader? That really wasn't so far off from them, but they've come light years away from 6th grade. So they can probably reflect and help you develop something for younger kids, or younger teens, or something for that older teen crowd that shows what they want now.
Okay, and we have another audience question here. So what are some current ways, if any, that you gather data for your library system or for teen services? So if there's like measures that you have in place or tools that you gather data, feel free to share. So just, yeah, asking teens at programs, exactly.
Yep.
So informally.
So surveys and teens filled it out. Did you give them candy? We always give, when in doubt, always give teens candy for doing anything. It just makes everybody happier. I'm glad, Melissa, that you brought up asking teens. I think a lot of us forget that that face-to-face conversation with any library patron is actually the best and most critical way that we gather feedback. Teen council, suggestion boxes are great. Oh, perfect. Including teens in focus groups and, you know, formal ways like a library redesign. Do you also feel like you gather enough data to kind of let you know which direction to move, whether it's summer reading, teen services in general? Do you feel like you have the information that you need? Yeah, I think I've always run into this, regardless of the library I'm in. Teens saying, hey, yes, I absolutely want to attend X, Y, or Z, and then not coming. And I think if we knew how to get people.
Well, one thing I just wanted to add is kind of a side note that we started doing is, and not, you know, all libraries are able to do this, but if we have a scheduled time for a program, you know, and we got everything set out, everything ready, we're waiting for people, no one shows, and you know, that's an awful feeling, but say maybe 2 days later, there's a group that just randomly comes in, or, you know, could be 2, 3 kids, however, you know, many teens show up, then we repeat that same program and, you know, can get in our numbers that way, can get in the experience that way, and we call that guerrilla programming, you know, by any means necessary. So, you know, like I said, it won't work at every library because other people's schedules might be a little more confined, but you know, for those libraries that do work and do have that audience, that might be an option as well.
Yeah. Teens are changing very, very quickly. Our Teen Summer Reading Survey list, you know, do you want to be connected with via Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr? I feel like there's something else we should have included that we just don't know about, that teens are on, but we're not. I also wish there was a better way to do text message reminders to teens, but there just doesn't seem to be one that we found yet. we're also librarians, so I think most of us could never have too much information. And so I think as we're moving into the next slide, some of the stuff we're going to talk about is how you can use other information from other organizations to help build your story as well.
Okay, so we're going to touch a little bit on getting information about existing information on teen behavior. And there's a lot of ways that you can collect information locally. So for communities that might have organizations such as United Way, might have after school organizations, clubs. Kids Count Data is a national website that collects data locally, so you can search by state and even drill it down a little further. So things like, graduation rates, poverty level, free and reduced lunch, things like that. You'll find that information related to your location. So going back to when we talked about what information do you want to know, and then connecting it to either these local or national resources. The Pew Internet and American Life studies, for example, you've probably seen those cited a lot on the YALSA blog, looking at teen reading behavior patterns, teen technology use. Certainly there's a lot of information coming out about I think, Stacy, you mentioned using the badges for summer reading. So, a lot of information in terms of how to measure, the success of that definitely exists nationally. And so to give you, some examples of how to tie in that data, with other sources, could be something as ambitious, looking at what test scores are in a certain school that maybe you decide to target. And, this is just one example, and it's a pretty ambitious example. But by gathering summer reading program and tying that into their improvement, with their test scores is one goal. That would probably involve a lot. And, a lot of you are starting your summer program, so maybe this summer, you wouldn't want to start off that ambitious. It would certainly involve a partnership with the school itself, as well as, discussions on how you're going to collect the data. But that is an option. That is a goal out there. If, your library administration decides that, they really want to focus on that and have your goals to say that contributed to that. And again, as I mentioned before, really there's not a lot of data out there that exists, so you would likely be building this from scratch. So a few less ambitious examples of what might be possible this summer, since you're already starting your program or already have started, is like a lot of you said, you already have surveys for things like if they as a summer reading program. And then looking at, for example, the Pew Internet and American Life studies, and looking at the habits and going back to your data that you collected, and you can say, X amount of teens in my community match, or this is where they come in terms of the national data is showing for their interest in reading, or how they feel their knowledge has improved as a result of being in the program. So developmental assets are another way that you can tie in your data with your summer reading program. And this is a really often cited resource from YALSA as well. And this comes from the Search Institute, where they have 40 developmental assets listed on their site. So those skills that we're looking to build into teens to become, successful adults, things like having staff your summer reading program, you're giving them productive in a safe environment. So how are all these things contributing to help build them into more successful adults? And also don't leave out the parents and caregivers and the if you do decide to go with the survey format as well. So not just the teens, but the adults as well to provide input. Okay, so our next slide is going to touch on our anecdotes and stories of impact. And I'll try to sum this up in a nutshell because I know it's a lot of text. And so basically, a librarian was able to find some books that, for the team that came into the library to read, that the mother couldn't, she was pretty frustrated. She just couldn't find it. And then the second anecdote talks about where a staff member got a team to sign up for the summer reading program that was previously reluctant to because she had some attention, issues in reading. And she came back to the library and thanked the librarian. So we use stories to kind of tug at the heartstrings of our stakeholders to really get personal. We can use teens' first names and to show, just to tell a little story around the difference that the library is making with the summer reading program. So parts of the anecdote should include detail. It could be from the patron, that can always make it more powerful. And every interaction doesn't have to be this grand outcome, or what you think might be a grand outcome. I mean, it could just be something simple as they decided to sign up for the summer reading program when they were previously reluctant, and that can really
still tell a huge story. So don't think that anything is too small. And you can always collect more anecdotes than you'll really put out in your report. So don't, again, as Catherine mentioned, we probably never have enough information as librarians. So just a suggestion of what to keep in mind when writing an anecdote. That actually would include a person. So the team could be a parent. Caregiver. Problem. That that they have. And then how the library. And then the ending, is hopefully a positive ending that the library made. So, don't just count these stories of impact and the reach that they have to include in different ways, whether it's a written report or in person, when you're delivering some of the messages of your program. All right, awesome. Another audience question. So, what are some ways you guys market your programs? I know one of you mentioned earlier you have the teams, you create flyers and pass them out. So, that's one great example. I'm sure you guys mentioned. So feel free to share.
Using teens to develop programs, and then by having them develop those programs and getting their input, they're automatically going to be so much more excited to share it with a friend. And that kind of grassroots marketing, you can't pay for that, first of all, but you also can't really duplicate it by being an adult, regardless of how cool you are. Lots of social media, electronic newsletters, Facebook, Twitter. And teens are the stars of the videos, absolutely. School visits. Our library is making a very focused effort to visit Title I schools this year to promote summer reading, and I'm kind of overwhelmed by the response that we've gotten, especially from schools that we were previously, no, we don't really have time for the library. Our classroom hours are really packed. But we've said, hey, we want to come in and promote summer reading, and we've gotten an overwhelming response. And we've been able to talk with kids and teens face to face, which has really been key. And every day that staff at my library have gone to a school, we've had at least 15 or 16 kids or teens saying, hey, I saw you at school. Can I go ahead and sign up for that summer reading thing? So that face-to-face thing is probably as good as you can get it. So lots of flyers. Okay, perfect. And I think we want to go ahead and move on to the next slide, but just be conscious of finding new avenues, letting teens lead the marketing of your programs as you guys are all doing, but we want to be conscious of our time.
Okay, so I think Catherine touched a little bit on so anyone from staff, teams, parents, community members, library YALSA, don't just count posting on the blog. YALSA has tons of avenues to share what you're doing in your summer reading programs. So really being the face of teen services and your summer reading program, if that is your position. So finding any opportunities to speak at various meetings, maybe your managers have their own manager meeting that you can share this information at. Just trying to think of new avenues maybe that the teen services haven't really had a voice yet, or to what's the word continue with spreading the message of what teen service is doing and formulating it in outcome based. So saying what the impact has been of your summer reading program so far, can definitely shed a bit new light on what you're doing, including those stories of impact. Other ideas, reaching out to local newspaper, local reporters, any events. I know in our paper we have a Young Achievers column, and sometimes they come out to the library to highlight a specific event. So if you do have a marketing department, chances are they're probably already sending out this information, and then whether or not someone responds to it can definitely help add that extra information. Oh, I love that. Yeah, the Read software with a grant from YALSA, definitely read posters. That sounds fantastic. And then also, of course, having a everyone that's been involved in the summer reading process, especially staff, teams as well, and just thanking them, thanking them for their support, and then moving on to the future.
And I think as you're using this summer as a jumping off point for the next level of team services, it's never too early to start planning. Last year, I was brought on board in August to begin planning the 2013 summer reading program. So we've been working on it for quite a while, and I already have a Word doc set up with things that I want to change for next year. So it's never too early to start thinking about what you can be doing differently. And I think as you're building for the long term, take note of the staff members, especially the interns, the teens that are hanging around, of those folks that you can really kind of not just take under your wing and not necessarily get on your side, but that are your allies. Finding those folks who can help not only promote events in the community, but help be the voice of teen services, because you also get to go home and have dinner at a normal time. Things like that. You want somebody to be able to be just as excited about teen services and summer reading or the teen interns and their successes when you can't be out on the floor all 12 hours that the library is open. And I think that's where those stories of impact and anecdotes and capturing those really becomes crucial. I think a lot of you guys, especially those of you with interns, have a couple or at least one intern or volunteer, and you're like, they were that person that you knew they needed this experience, but you knew it was going to be so much work. You knew that they were just going to be distracted or just maybe weren't quite as mature as some of your other interns or volunteers, but you knew that they needed this. That's where your stories of impact will lie. We have lots of teen volunteers, and I have one that sticks out in my head, and she needed this. And I had to be on her every single minute of her volunteer shift. And her home life wasn't so great. She wasn't the star student, but she was at the library every day, and she was generally pretty helpful, but I knew it was going to be a lot of work to rein her in. And by the end of the summer, she was much more independent. She was much more courteous, thought a little bit more before something flew out of her mouth. Her grades were better that school year. So that's our story of impact. I think stories of impact also happen with other staff, the staff member that burst into the break room and is like, you will never believe what just happened. Sometimes they're not so good, but a lot of times it's that kid that was in here skateboarding last week, he just signed up for summer reading. Or, the kid that we had suspended last year came back in to ask to see if he could really come back in and use the library. He needed a book for school. So I think getting staff on board can help plan and make your program even better. And I think you guys are the only ones that can really be the face for that and can really start taking your program to the next level. And it's never too early to start planning for future years. It's never too early to start talking up that book club in September that a teen who's here really wants to start. Never too early to start planning those things this summer. So I think this grant opportunity that you all have is a great opportunity to build on the successes that you've already had, as well as a successful summer that I know each and every one of you will have. And then
our next few slides just include some further resources that you might want to take advantage of. Of course, the YALSA Summer Reading Wiki, books on summer summer reading programs. The YALSA site has a lot of great information on outcome-based evaluation for programming, and ALA has got a whole office for research and statistics that might give you some idea of areas that you want to focus on for your goals for the summer reading program. So definitely check those out if you're interested. And here we are again. We do have a volunteer program, we do have an intern program, we do have outcome-based measures for either of these programs. We'd be happy to share.
And we do have some time for questions, but I do want to make note of a question that Ron asked earlier. He says, it seems like many teachers are not as supportive of the public library as they could be. How can we change that? I think that's one of those things that's very community specific, and I think it's up to you, unfortunately, to be the squeaky wheel. I know that staff at my library send an email to the principal, literacy facilitators, a media specialist, and maybe the chair of like the English department or language arts for middle school at the beginning of every school year saying, hey, we're your library location. We see students in here after school doing homework. Let us know how we can help you. And we usually don't get a response back. And it's kind of disheartening. And I think every year we try a different tactic. So this year what we did is we said, we want to come to one of your staff meetings and take 10 minutes to tell you about what the public library offers so you can tell your students. And we have probably 6 or 7 schools in our area, and only one took us up on that. But I do know that from that, we saw more kids from that school in our library knowing that they could come to the library to complete their homework, use the computer, that kind of thing. And then specifically with the elementary schools that I'm working with, they're all Title I schools near my library, and our staff sent out something saying, hey, can we come and promote summer reading? We want your kids to be reading over the summer just as much as you do. We want them coming to school in September really prepared. And most schools said yes. And then we have this one naysayer school that's kind of really disheartening that they're not as interested in our partnership simply because they're the closest school and we see more students from that school than any other school. And we actually kind of peer pressured them. We said, well, we've been able to go visit classes at XYZ school. It's, you need to let us come do that too. A little bit of pressure, and they said, okay, you can be on the announcements. Not perfect, but we'll take what we can get. And by being on the announcements, we were able to send out a bookmark that promoted summer reading to all the kids. So they were taking something home. Hopefully it would find its way into a parent's hand, or hopefully the kid would say, oh yeah, something about the library. Can we go to the library? Or something about reading this summer. Hopefully it kind of translates in that way. I think it's a lot of hard work, and I think if you're in a larger area, staffing at schools, there's occasionally a lot of turnover and principals change, and I've learned that the way a school runs is very much dependent upon how involved the principal is, and it's just a trickle down kind of thing. So marketing to teachers, the teens are there 7 hours a day. We would love to be able to get in and develop a relationship with them at school. Folks are saying that response is